Hello guys, this is James and today we're gonna talk about EM and REM, the relative units in CSS. Relative units, of course, compared to the absolute units is something relative. But what exactly is here? Actually, even in some preset tags, it's already used those relative units. For instance, we just define something like simple as this, P, and then it has one inside. In our browser, so we can see that one just display here. But what we can really notice is that it really have a margin top and margin bottom. And then let's check here. It says margin block start 1 EM, margin block end 1 EM. And then let's go to this box model. It shows that margin have 16 pixels. So it means that 1 EM equals to 16 pixels. That's how we basically calculate it. And to make it more precise, so we have something here. And then we create the two span. As we can see, both the span elements share one class box, and each of them have another class box small and the other one have block large. Now let's discuss the rules set in CSS regarding EM. EM really depends on the current font size in the same tag. If the font size here is 16 pixels, then the EM equals to 16 pixels. And if the font size is like 200 pixels, the EM will in this tag will be 200 pixels. That's the rule one. And rule two is that if we don't define any font size in this exactly tag, it will inherit everything from the father tag. And let's just go to the CS to see it better. Here, actually, both of them, we just explicitly defined a font size. 12 pixels and 18 pixels. Then we go to the box. And the box is the class shared by the two span tag. And then we can see that the padding is 1 EM. So what's the padding for the box small? Since it defined the font size 12 pixels, and then the padding equals to 12 times 1, 12 pixels. And the border radius is also 12 pixels. And when it comes to the larger box, then it's 18 pixels and the radius 18 pixels. So it will present as two boxes with different size there because we set different font size. So anything in the same tag, their EM will all depends on the font size. Okay, as we see that already there are two boxes are really present in the browser, and we can really check the margin, the padding, and the border, and it really works that way. 12, 12, the radius, and then 18 and 18. All right, yeah, that's the rules we applied. And so we can check this example. We can get clearer about this. So here we just define one class slogan. And in the CSS, what we have done here is the font size 1.2 EM, padding 1.2 EM. So the first question is, so what's the font size here? Since the EM, it doesn't really define any font size, but it uses font size, use EM directly. So we have to really search for the font size of the parent tag. The parent one is already here, the body. The body have, automatically or by default 16 pixels. So here is 1.2 times 16. That's the font size here. So padding, my question, this is kind of crucial. So what's the size of the padding? It's also 1.2 times 16 or 1.2 or some other things. The answer is it's really 1.2 times the font size here, because everything later on will based on the font size. We first define the font size is 1.2 times 16, and then here the padding should be the 1.2 times the current font size. That's 1.2 times 16. So the result will be 1.2 times 1.2 times. We can check in the browser. Now we choose to check the padding. So the padding here, what we got is really 1.2 times 1.2 times 16. So that's the result. And here we also can see that the margin is 19.2. Why is like that? Because originally we have the margin for the P tag, right? And then since here in the P, it has the margin block start 1 EM, margin block end 1 EM. And now the EM is not equals to 16 already because we have explicitly said the font size is 1.2 times 16. So of course the margin will also be the 1.2 times 16. That's yield our margin value here. So it's a little bit tricky. And also look, we can notice that the P elements, the tag already overlapped with the above two box. Which what does it mean? It means that if the above is a inline element and below it's a block element, and then the inner elements will really line based on the border rather than the margin. The margin automatically will overlap with some parts of the like padding of the inner elements, because even inner elements we set the margin top and bottom, it will not really show in the browsers. So it will overlap with the margin, no, with the padding of the inner elements. That's something we observe. Okay, let's continue. This is another thing we have to consider after we analyze it. So each time, if we have a lot of UL and LI, the unwanted list like this, and what we're gonna do is just to set the first UL, the use EM to set it. Something like this. The font size equals to 0.8 EM. And let's see what will happen here. We want something at the same size, but why it's become smaller, smaller, and smaller? It's also, I think the answer is because this UL will set 0.8 EM. The father of this UL is 16 pixels. So it will really have 16 times 0.8. And this one is also set as 0.8 EM. And then it will also looking for the father. The father is LI or the UI. It's already 0.8 times 16. So it will really times 0.8 again. So little by little, it will get smaller and smaller. But that's not something we really want. We really want or the UL should really be displayed in a uniform size. So what can we do with it? The first thing we can do is that, okay, we just set only the first UL, the 0.2 EM, 8 EM, and then we see the rest like 1 EM. So every time we inherit it from the father, and it always times 1, so it's equal. And then let's see the result. Look, it has changed to the same size. But there's some more a little resolution solution to it. We just use something rather 0.8 EM with something like this, REM. And R refers to the root. So this one means this font size always constantly refers to the size of the root. Since the root is 16 pixels as 1 EM, so this one will be always 0.8 times 16. And all the UL tags will be like that. So there will not be something like extra inflation or extra shrinking. And let's see the result. All right, it's really displayed well. So here we have a conclusion is that since we already know both REM and EM, we should really use the REM for the font size. So it really can have something that refers to the root. And then it's something we are really not constantly changing, especially in the above example, the listed example, right? It will not shrink like that. So we set the IM for the font size. Pixels for borders. Why we have to set pixels for borders? Sometimes we really want to see a thin borders by pixels. So we don't really set it as IEM because it's oversized or too big for the border. And also we set the EM for the major other properties. Why? Because we already have a steady IEM here, and everything will just refers to this IEM we set in that tag, in that element. So we set this steady, and this one also will be very consistent because it just refers to something we have said. So let's give another example here, and then we can see actually how we really set IM, EM. First, we analyze that it has one div wrapped to H2 and another div. Also in div, we have like a tag. All right, so how we can really set it, right? So first in the panel. So the panel refers to the outer space, and it has the font size 1, means that IEM. Look, we set something like IEM. It means the font size within the panel, it already becomes 16 pixels, and the padding is IEM. So it means the padding will be also the 1 times EM. So what's EM here? EM is the font size, 16 pixels. We have calculated already. So it should be padding 16 pixels already. And the border, as we said, it should be a thin line. We should use the pixel to set it. And the border radius, as we said, it should be also EM, because since font size is already something set, and then the border radius is like padding is 0.5 times EM. EM is 16 pixels, so border size should be 8. And then there's ladder H2. H2 is something that is wrapped here. And then we set something like the font size 1.2 EM. So what's the 1 EM here? EM is really inherit from the father one. No, sorry. So it's a margin top. So there's no margin top, okay? The font size is 0.28 EM. So what is the EM here? It's really from the father one. It's right, 16 pixels. So the font size should be 0.8 times 16, and then the other set. So we can see the result of it. Yeah, it's something like this. So that's really use our rules we have talked about to really set the, how those different properties. And sometimes if we think, okay, we really want to change the size of it, make it larger, we only maybe can just want to change it here, because everything for the rest in this tag, or even in the sub tag, in the sub elements, all depends on this property. If we set it 1.2 IEM, and then the font size will become 1.2 times 16, and then the padding also will be 1 times EM, means 1.2 times 16. Also the radius, even this font size will depend on that. So we can see that it just become larger. We can really test by just check. For instance, this panel, as we say that originally it should be 8, but since 8 times 1.2 already, so it should be 9.6. Everything is so consistent. That's really the pattern we how to use the both REM and EM. Then I think that's almost for all for these relative units, IEM and EM. And the key is to understand when and how to use the IEM and the EM, how to calculate, and what we can gain from using it. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next.